Hello and welcome to another episode of Radcast Outdoors. We've been trucking along, having fun. Spring is in full bloom. We actually have some nice weather outside. It's perfect to get out and do a little spring bear hunting. Season hasn't quite wrapped up, but we got some tips and tricks this episode on what to do to try and get a spring bear.
This episode of Radcast Outdoors is brought to you by PK Lures, Bow Spider, and High Mountain Seasonings.
Fish on! Hey, Radcast is on.
Hunting, fishing, and everything in between. This is Radcast Outdoors. Here are David Merrill and Patrick Edwards.
Well, hi, everybody. It's good to be back. I'm glad to be here on Radio Land. I'm thankful you're still here with us, checking us out. Go stop by the website. Make sure you check out all the swag we got going. We just got done with our giveaway. That was pretty cool. We had a lot of people intrigued and engaged in that, so that was neat to see. All our fans and listeners out there trying to get some swag. So if you didn't win, definitely go check out what's on the website. Go support all those sponsors that donated all that stuff. It's really neat that they're definitely extending their hand and supporting us. I know that. So if you could, whether you're into the seasonings or the bow hunting or the fishing or even Fremont County Stoneworks, say you got Father's Day coming up, you need a Father's Day gift. He can make anything, and he can put your logo, your name on it. So
pretty much anything that you want, Mike can get it done. And I also just want to say a big shout out to Jeremiah Fike for winning. I know he was very excited to get all that stuff. We put a Facebook post up and he was grinning pretty big. So I think he's going to enjoy all the loot that he just got in that box. So that's pretty awesome. And we'll be doing a summer giveaway here.
We're definitely going to do another one. Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, it's been crazy. This last episode was episode 50 for David and I. So that's kind of a big deal. Kind of a big milestone for us. We weren't really sure how many episodes we were going to get through, but
when we first set out, we committed to doing 12 and see how it went, and we're way past that now. And I'm loving it, having fun, so I'm sticking around. How about you?
Yeah, I think it's going to be awesome, and there's a lot of ideas, and we've got some good guests lined up for in the future, and so I think the future is bright for us. And today we're going to talk about spring bear, and this is definitely out of my wheelhouse. This is definitely more in David's wheelhouse. But, spring bear, I hear from a lot of friends, is a lot of fun. And my buddy Seth up in Idaho, he makes an annual event out of it. And so I wanted to pick your brain. So tell me a little bit about spring bear.
Well, it's probably one of the best ways to cure cabin fever, right? Been cooped up all winter, especially here in the northern half of the United States. We've been stuck inside way too long, and it's the grass is getting green, the flowers are popping, and I've always relished my time of taking a 4-day, 5-day, 7-day spring bear hunt, especially if you draw a tag in a unit somewhere, and going with a group of guys and going spring bear hunting. And it's just a different animal. I mean, as far as the hunt and the species itself, right? You are hunting a predator, and we could talk for hours about whether that's right, wrong, or indifferent. And I don't want to get super political about it. We're going to talk about what you do if you're going to go. So right. Caveat, if you don't want to spring bear hunt or you're not into it, go do something else today.
Well, I know the bears here in Wyoming, I mean, black bears, they wake up in the springtime, they're hungry, they're ready to get out and about, just like we are. I mean, they have cabin fever worse than we do. They don't get up in the middle of winter. So, what do you look for as far as patterns? And, when you're trying to set up or plan for a bear hunt, what do you look for?
So they're going to be, the first week or two they wake up, they're pretty sluggish, they're pretty groggy, they're not very active. So it kind of depends, are you going early in the season or later in the season? That's really going to depend on what you're doing. But for the most part, you got two options, really. In some states you can bait bear. Other states it's purely glassing, spotting, stalking, right? So if you can't bait, we'll just go down that rabbit hole, and that's the most fun for me. I have baited bears. I have nothing against baiting bears. It's actually a lot of fun to check trail cameras, you're a little more controlled in your environment, and so it's a lot easier to take newbies or children, into a bear bait barrel and have some success and opportunity. So I'm by no means thumbing my nose up at baiting bears, because it's actually a lot of fun. My favorite part is just checking trail cameras and seeing which bears are coming in, and sometimes watching the interactions between two bears at the barrel at the same time. So
what kind of stuff are you throwing in that barrel?
You need to check your regulations per state. Some states you need to pre-register your bait. Some states you even have to, lottery draw to pre-register a square tract of mile like this state, and then you can put a bait out. Most states you cannot use game meat of any kind. So whether that be fish, whether that be meat, you can't, that's not an appropriate means. A lot of people will use dog food. That's a good one. Honestly, donuts and popcorn.
I've heard about the donuts part.
Donuts and popcorn with, I'll give a shout out to Cam Haynes. He had a recipe for bear crack, and Kool-Aid, marshmallows, and sugar reduced down and poured over the top of popcorn and donuts is, and you cook it right at the bait, so you get that burnt sugar smell wafting, and hey boo-boo, Ranger Rick says if we raid one more picnic basket, right? There's some truth in that. As far as when I was in Alaska, I don't remember specifically the regulations, but you couldn't use a lot of different things, right? You couldn't use, and so I was pretty much relegated down to I used COB and mixed it with molasses and put it out there, and that's corn, oats, and barley, right? Mm-hmm. But the grizzly bears really like that. I've got some cool pictures of two bears up fighting, and I got a couple daylight pictures of just a 10-foot giant, 5 foot at the shoulder type bear, which is that's a VW Beetle walking down the road towards you, no joke. So that was a little eerie walking into that bait by yourself. I'm definitely pistol and shotgun and head on a swivel, and every twig snap you're to refill that thing, you're in, change the card, get back out of there. So, and I never harvested a bear on that barrel. I have harvested other bears on barrels before, and like I said, the harvest is just a small portion of that. There's a ton of work that goes into establishing the bait, following the rules, getting a supply of some sort of bait. Beef tallow is a really good, go by a butcher and see if you can get some of that stuff. They're omnivores, right? They eat about everything, but the higher fat content you can get, higher carbs, higher fat, so sugars, and beaver carcasses is a wonderful bait.
Well, they just took a long nap, so they're looking for something to kind of get their system going again.
And so that'll segue. Before we get off of baiting, you really, if you're going to bow hunt, you want your tree stand to be within about 20 yards of the barrel. 40 would be max, and you don't want to be 35 feet up a tree, but you don't want to be 8 feet up a tree, right? That 14 to 16, maybe even 20 foot range. And you want to try and clear out some of the brush and shooting lanes so you don't have branches in the way. And, it sets your camera. What I do is I actually set my camera up pretty high, 8 feet off the ground, put a stick behind it to angle it back down towards the barrel. I don't know what it is, but you either get a little food smell or human smell or whatever on your hands, and you touch your camera. Bears love to put teeth hole through your trail camera, and it doesn't work very long. So if you can, stand on a box, stand on a log, and put that camera as high as you can reach, and then put a stick on the top half of it to angle it at about a 20-degree angle down, you'll still get all the pictures you want of the barrel, and most of the time the bears will leave it alone. They still can climb up there and get after it, but if you put it at 4 feet straight at the barrel, you're going to get a lot of nose pictures, and you might get teeth mark in your trail camera. So, there's just a few things like that of figuring out the prevailing wind from where your stand is and where your barrel is and where you think the bears are going to try and access, and they're going to use the cover. They're not going to walk across the middle of a meadow in the middle of the day, right? They're going to follow a creek bottom or follow a timber line or whatever you've got on where you can legally bait. And so paying attention to that prevailing wind so that, what you want to do is you want to walk past your stand to the barrel with the wind in your favor when you're baiting it. So when you go to sit in it, you don't have to walk past your barrel. You just walk to your tree, climb up your tree, and you haven't left any scent there. I mean, the bears are obviously going to get used to human scent. What I found interesting is, we've hunted a few different barrels in a few different states, and one of the biggest bears ever killed was killed 15 minutes after guys got dropped off at the bait on a four-wheeler. Usually, we'll park half a mile, 3/4 mile away and sneak in. But occasionally, depending on what hunters we have, some guys, just, if you have somebody drive you in, drop you off, and drive back out, a bear can be laying up there 200-300 yards and hear that and think that you just refreshed the barrel and he wants to get in there and beat his buddies, right? It gets to be, when it gets fun is when you get 2 or 3 bears hitting the same barrel. And then there's some competition for that food. Just like any other resource, once you get competition, they get a little less weary, a little less, just elusive, and they start becoming less nocturnal and they start hitting that barrel pretty consistent. So that's the goal, is you're trying to get a bear that you're kind of almost can pattern. And sometimes those bears will come in, find that barrel, and they'll just stay there for 36, 48 hours and just clean the barrel out. When I was in Alaska, specifically where I was baiting on the Kenai National Wildlife Refuge with a permit, you couldn't harvest a grizzly bear in the spring over the barrel. So I actually only cut about a 9-inch diameter hole in the top of my barrel. And I got pictures. We'll have to put one on. I had a 30-gallon heavy oil drum, not a lot of guys use 55-gallon plastic ones or even metal ones, but those are thinner. Well, and I used like 3/8 cable and cable ties and put 3 of them around the tree around the barrel. Well, that bear just sat there and swatted that bucket like a tennis racket, and it just kept, that 10-foot bear couldn't get food out of it, but if he hit it hard enough, some would shake out. By the time it was all done, my barrel looked like a crushed pop can. I mean, he got it loose enough, he got it sideways, and he just jumped on it and just cratered it. So, but he couldn't get his paw in that 9-inch hole, and the black bears and the smaller grizz could. So there's a tip of, cut a small hole in your barrel, and that's for your Alaska guys that don't want to have as many grizzlies living on your barrel. But once you get a bear hitting it consistently, you can plan on going through about two bags of dog food plus accoutrement a week, right? So couple bags of popcorn at home, whatever you can source, whatever's legal. Definitely check the regs. But I was hauling in. I was behind a lock gate, so I was going in on a mountain bike, and I would tie 2 50-pound bags on either side of the frame of the bike and have to kind of pedal with this 2 bags. I didn't want to hike the couple miles into my bait. So
that's a pretty good haul.
That was a good haul. And, if I ever got in trouble back there, we wouldn't be having this conversation, Patrick. So baiting with bears there's a ton of work that goes into it and, then you can have some better success. Like I said, if you're taking young kids or newbies, you can get up in that stand and be quiet. And if you're going to rifle hunt a bear barrel, that's even easier. Within 100 yards, you kind of need a clear lane to your barrel, and you don't have to pay as much attention to that prevailing wind. You still need to pay attention to it and kind of figure it out. And you don't want your scent blowing right at the barrel. And, in the mountains, you can't control the wind. Some nights it happens, and those bears, you'll notice if you're sitting in your stand and the wind's on the back of your neck facing the barrel, 9 times out of 10, no bears show up. They just, because as they approach it, they can smell you, and so they're designed to stay alive, Patrick.
Yeah, they're smart. So before we go too much farther, we better talk about some of our sponsors. So the sponsor for this part of the podcast is Bow Spider. So if you guys haven't heard about the Bow Spider yet, I don't know where you've been. But the Bow Spider is the system for when you got to pack your bow. I imagine on a black bear hunt, it would be pretty helpful to pack your bow in, potentially pack your bow up into the stand and have a place to hang it. Is that
completely
right?
Eliminates the pole rope, and you're in that situation. You're not having your bow in your hand. I pack a firearm, pack your binoculars. You can be paying attention to what you're doing, right? You get to your tree, definitely wear some sort of safety harness. There's a lot of macho guys out there. Oh, I don't need one. Oh, I've never worn one. Oh, I don't fall. And, I will say a couple times I've put my stand up without a harness just to put it up and get out of there. But when I'm hunting, I wear one. And even I think about when I'm putting it up, a fall from 14, 16 feet, I don't care how tough you are, you're going to break your pelvis, you're going to break your back, you're going to break some legs, and if you're by yourself up there in the woods. So definitely keep that safety in mind. But yeah, bow spider is, I mean, if you haven't figured that one out yet, bowspider.com is the website. YouTube, Instagram, Facebook's all bow spider. There's how-to videos. And I mean, it's just another tool in the woods. Can you harvest a bear without one? Certainly. Does it make it more pleasant walking to and from that stand, riding that bike to and from, going up and down the tree? Certainly.
Yeah, so go to bowspider.com, check them out, and get one for your next spring bear hunt or archery elk hunt or whatever you plan on doing. So with black bears, I mean, what are some things as far as the species goes that you need to be thinking of while you're hunting them? Because I'm sure they don't behave exactly like other species.
So black bears hibernate. So they're going to load up on calories all fall, store a whole bunch of fat. They're going to sleep all winter, consume that fat resource. So they're coming into spring starved. I mean, just super hungry. But that first 2 weeks, they actually have a plug in their intestinal tract, and they have to actually pass that plug. One of their last meals, and we can talk to a biologist, but they eat some, less digestible material, grass, hair, whatever it might be, and they kind of plug their system up so that their digestive system isn't working all winter. And that's weird to me, Think about not going to the bathroom for like 120 days.
Yeah, no kidding.
So they wake up, they're a little bit out of it. They're kind of groggy and lethargic for the first 10 days or so, and then they start getting after it. And when they get after it, I mean, they're going to focus in and key on a lot of shrubs, a lot of grasses mostly. I mean, any green grass slope is going to have bears hitting it. When we drive over Tokedy, where are the grizzly bears? They're on the south side of the highway, right there on the road where the fresh green shoots are coming up, right?
I've always wondered, why do they pick the grass when they could eat all the tourists that are taking a picture?
Yeah, maybe the grass is a little more tasty.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
You always know when there's one of those. And man, those people, if you're one of those people, I have no problem with you going up and taking pictures of bears. I've been one of those locals that has pulled over and taken a picture or two or a video. But do not be crossing the middle of traffic and not even looking. I mean, I'm trying to drive through there. I was taking that class in Jackson 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So I was going back and forth twice a week, and I can't tell you how many people I'm coming through. I've slowed down from 65 to 30, and without looking, I mean, there's people standing up through their sunroofs, just losing their mind, swerving, not in and out of traffic, swerving all over the road, trying to herd bears so they get that final perfect picture. And stay 100 yards away from those suckers. And just, if you, honestly, there's my advice. If you see one of those bears, pull over about 200-300 yards in front of the pack of people, in front of whichever way the bear's feeding, sit there, and the bear's going to walk right past you in about 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, Yogi doesn't like hugs either, so don't go over there and wrap your arm around Yogi and try to get a selfie. I don't think that's going to be the best plan in the world, but
no. So, but those bears are hitting those roads because all that snow melt and that sun, that's where those grass is first greening up. So the same thing you can do in the mountains is find those mostly southern facing exposed, usually clear ravines. And sometimes it depends on where you're hunting. Sometimes those bears can be, pretty high up the mountain. Sometimes they can be pretty low, I mean, right off the river bottoms where that grass is greening up and the snow can still be above it. So you got to kind of play that. And then those bears will start to fan out further and further, and they're definitely going to key in on any ungulates that have died over the winter, right? So, I mean, check the states again, but if you're hunting and there's a dead elk or a dead deer and you sit over it, I don't think that's baiting. You didn't place that there, right? Mm-hmm. Now, some game warden might be screaming on the end of the end listening, but in my opinion, it's hunting, it's fair game. And so, but that's where the cool part in that hunting is we've talked about baiting, and I enjoy it. But it's one tactic. The other tactic that I probably enjoy even more is just that spot and stalk. So finding those likely areas, hiking into, I like to hike into a place where I can get a really good vantage of maybe 5 or 6 or 7 ravines, drainages. I'll be on probably the north face looking across either a big drainage or something and looking at a lot of slopes where you can, and weather's really tough. If it's cold and rainy and snowy and nasty. I was just talking with Joe Bartlett actually this morning. He's been out this last week trying to film a bear hunt, and they've got snow up there and rain, and he said it felt more like a November mule deer hunt than it did a spring bear hunt. And they didn't have a lot of success this week, but the next couple of days the weather's going to change, and especially if those bears, when they get that nasty weather, they just go hide in the timber. And so trying to sneak up on a bear in the timber, he can hear better, he can definitely smell better than you. So that's tough to be done. But the spot and stalk for me is one of the favorite, and just because it's a lot of mornings, a lot of evenings glassing, hiking different ridges, and some days you can see multiple bears in a day, and then it just becomes a game of how can I get to him or within distance of him before he feeds out of the way. And I mean, we've drawn a couple tags there and right off the Snake in Oregon, and I can remember a thunderstorm. I'm on the middle of a stalk, found a nice bear, thunderstorm rolls over and you're down in the canyon so far, you can't tell when they're coming, right? It just pops over the ridge above you, and that bear goes running. I mean, you get hail or sideways rain, and that bear goes running for the timber when you're halfway through a stalk. It can be a little frustrating, but it's cool. I mean, you definitely want good optics. We've talked about that before. Mm-hmm. The best optics money can afford, and I'm a big fan of tripods. Put your 10 power binoculars on a tripod and have your spotting scope sitting there. And I like to grid the whole country, right? And so I just kind of go zigzagging back and forth, up and down at the same time. It's very slowly, just pan, and go from, the farthest upper left I can see to the lowest, lower right you can see in a grid pattern, and then do that again. And then I'll switch from doing that to just start picking out what I'd call, key features of, well, that black spot wasn't there, or that brown spot wasn't there, and just keep watching ridges, just, because after you grid it, and I do this every 5-10 minutes, I grid it, and then I go through for a couple minutes and just focus on spots where key bears could be. And then after I've done that for a little bit, just put my binoculars down, just look at the whole hillside, take the whole thing in, and then go back to gridding again. So I'll pull that spot and scope out, pick apart any little features that I can't quite discern with the binoculars, and then go right back to gridding again. And you'll do that all morning, right? The cool part is usually there's some Merrill mushrooms popping. Midday naps are always crucial, especially getting up at daylight. Those bears they're still going to be predominantly active during mid-morning and mid-afternoon towards evening. Now that doesn't mean that at noon you don't get a bear that gets hungry and gets up from wherever he's sleeping in the shade and walks out. And it depends on temperature too. If it's really hot and you're talking a black bear, he's gonna kind of be a little shy of the sun. He gets, you think about walking around with a heavy black coat on in midday, you're not going to do it much either.
You're going to cook.
So but if it's relatively cool, and color phase bears, I don't think they get as hot, right, as the jet black ones. So, and I could be wrong, but they are where they are, and you find them where you find them. But those are some really good places to start. The other fun thing to do that not a lot of people do is take a predator call with you, right? They're an omnivore, but they're also a carnivore. They eat meat, right? They're a predator, and they will key into, and a lot of people don't know this, but bears are very, very effective at harvesting calf elk, black bears especially. Grizzlies, I don't think they are as much. They can be for sure, but I know that in the spring, a huge portion of mortality is due to, at least for elk, is due to black bears. And there's been a couple studies on grizzlies on moose calf populations in BC and up in Alaska, and an adult grizzly bear can eat like 40 calves in a week. He just goes from one to the next, and so that's why those ungulates try and drop all their calves at the same time, or pretty close to it, to try and, because for that first week, they don't stand a chance of running away from a bear.
No, bears are fast and athletic, so they're not going to get away. But what are some things to think about as far as, your your setup as far as if you're going to rifle hunt or bow hunt? What are some things that you need to think about? Maybe some calibers you might want to consider if you're going to go on a hunt like that.
So I have a pretty decent rule of thumb, and it's just a rule of thumb. It's not Bible or gospel or anything like that, but I like to keep at least 1 foot-pound of energy in my projectile for every pound the animal is, right? So if you're going to be hunting a 750-pound elk, your bullet needs to be maintaining about 750 foot-pounds of kinetic energy. Now, that's not to say that, you can shoot farming, you could shoot a big bull with a 22 at 5 yards, and you're going to drop I'm talking
a 1-ton bull. Yeah.
You're going to talk, a beef cattle will fall to a 22 very quickly. But we're not talking about something in a pen at 5 yards. So, looking at your ballistics of whatever firearm you choose, and bears are comparatively to bison, elk, moose, they're relatively thinner boned, thinner skinned, but they can absorb a lot of lead. They are, tough like a bear, right? They're pretty.
There's a reason there's that saying. You read like Lewis and Clark and some of the things they talked about in countering the grizzly bears and bears when they came out west. They are tough, but yeah, to your point, you want something that's actually going to do the job.
But, as far as a black bear, if you're not talking those Iowa bears that are 900-pound black bear, if we're talking an out west black bear in the 300 to 400 pounds, you keep the distances reasonable. 243 and above is plenty. I'd be cautioned to say, hey, I'm going to take my 223 out there. I would want a little more behind it. I'm not saying that it can be done. I'm not saying that you can't or it's not legal. I'm just saying, and again, some states you need to check the regs.
Yeah,
but
I was going to say some states probably have a minimum requirement that you got to look at. And
that's why my rule of thumb is actually pretty decent, because I don't really care what's stamped on the back of your caliber. Let's talk about what foot-pounds of energy that bullet's producing at that yardage. Are we talking, I'm going to shoot a black bear on a barrel at 120 yards with a 243 with, some nice nozzler partitions? That rifle, that combination at that distance, you put it where it's supposed to be, and there's no black bear on the planet that's going to absorb that and run away if you're accurate with it, right? But if we're talking in the wind, shooting 750 yards across the canyon, you better be looking at, something that's got quite a bit more bullet speed and trajectory and carry that, muzzle energy. So, I would say bare minimum for something like that, no pun intended, is, something in maybe the 300s. Really, right. Honestly, you're 28 nozzlers, your 7mm Remington Ultra Mags, your 300s, and that's if you're talking, hey, I want to shoot a bear at distance. And again, you need to be able to have been practiced with that. Just because the back of the box says this is the bullet drop, if you haven't gone out, put a cardboard or a steel target out, and put a couple holes in the center of it at that distance, you have no rhyme or reason or right to be shooting that kind of distances. So there's some cool technology out there. The Burris Eliminator scope and some of those others, Sig Sauer's got one now. A couple other companies have, where you range it either internally with the scope or with a rangefinder, and through Wi-Fi it actually moves a lighted reticle and gives you your holdover. Now you still got to deal with windage, and that's in the mountains. It might be blowing east to west here on the other side of that river 700 yards away. It could be blowing completely different direction. So you've got all that to take into account for sure. So knowing your equipment, knowing your capabilities, and having practiced. If you're going to do it with a bow, which I highly recommend, that adds a whole nother level of, when you're sneaking up on a feeding bear and you got to get right in his living room, it heightens all your senses to a point you didn't think you could heighten your senses. And it definitely, you can hear your heart beating out of your chest, right? Every movement, every bird, every squirrel, it's there. And it's it's definitely a game of life or death. We call it a game. It's life or death for them. But, if it goes wrong, it can go really wrong. So, would highly recommend the buddy system in any outdoor activity, and we can discuss some of that later. But, just especially on spring bear hunts, letting people knowing where you are, where you're going, that can be, you can get a nasty spring storm, right? And if you have a vehicle breakdown, if you sprain an ankle, whatever it might be, people kind of need to know where to start looking for you and when you're supposed to have been coming back. So those are things, know your equipment, have some outdoor survival skills, go with somebody that if you're going into new country, having done some e-scouting is awesome. That's one tool that, 20 years ago, we had maps, Patrick. I can remember going down and printing colored maps.
I still have a bunch.
Aerial photos, right, were way better than maps. You're like, topo photo and the map, I can really figure something out, right? And we had these things called compasses. And I remember I got my first GPS, and then GPS with a map on it. And then, now I've got, base maps and Onyx on your phone is, we've all got our phone with us, right? It's an expensive tool. I can remember you used to get the chip with the state for I can't remember. It was cheap. You owned all the states with the chip in your GPS for now it's, $50 a year for the basic and $100 a year for the premium. But I will tell you, most of those GPSs are a little archaic to try and navigate. They can just be frustrating. And on my phone, it's pretty easy to go to here, go to there, drop a pin here, share a pin with somebody. So I know we touched on that safety. I know we touched on your equipment. The bow is awesome. It is a cool, and you need to check state regs again, but pretty much if you're pulling 50 pounds with good arrows and good broadheads, and we could discuss broadheads for days, but as long as you've got a broadhead that's sharp, that holds together. And again, if you put it, you shoot, bears have big, heavy bones. You shoot an arrow or a bullet into a bone, that's a problem. You need to study some anatomy and figure out where to hold on a bear. They're a little different than a deer and elk, but we'll get on to when you finally harvest a bear, that's the fun part. Bear stew it's a different meat. It's a different texture. The flavor is amazing. If you can get on a blueberry bear somewhere in the fall, those bears are, the ones in Alaska the fat is purple, Patrick, instead of white. Mm-hmm. And it's like it's been marinated in a blueberry sauce. So definitely cook your bear very well done.
Yeah, you don't want trichinosis.
Yes, trichinosis is well, some of our listeners probably haven't heard, but Steven Ranella in Alaska filmed a hunt where they were successful, and he said, it's good enough, and they all ate it, and they all got it. So
it's not fun having stuff moving around in your guts and tearing up your insides, so you want to cook it really well. And speaking of cooking, I have to bring up high mountain seasonings. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring them up. Let's say you go kill a spring bear. They've got everything that you need to process that animal as far as the spices and everything to cook it. So if you're going to make something like that, you could use high mountain seasonings.
Oh, certainly. It's a dark red meat. It's got great flavor, and somebody said it seems a little inefficient to get protein that way as far as, eating carnivores. And I could see their point, but at the same point in time, usually I'm a second-hand vegetarian, but I'm okay being a third-hand vegetarian.
Well, and they are an omnivore, so they are grazing. They're kind of like a cow by the fall. They fattened up and everything, but yeah.
Oh, it's that is the one cool thing about, you're talking a big bear in the 500, 550, upwards pounds. He's going to come out of winter somewhere in the 300s. And by the fall they get every other biting insect like any other critter, and they'll start itching. And you can, what's really cool is if you walk around the woods and you pay attention, you can find a tree where the bark is all scraped off of one side. It kind of looks like an elk rub. But if you look on the other side, you'll see claw marks, and the bears kind of reach up, just like you and I do sometimes at home, reach up, grab the wall behind us, and scratch our back against the wall. Bears will do that, and they'll leave claw marks, but they'll leave, really long, human-like hair, whatever color. Elk have that coarser ungulate hair, and bears kind of have that furry, fuzz, human-esque kind of hair, right? It's finer, it's a little more pliable.
So let's say you drop a bear and you're going to use high mountain seasonings to cook it. What do you think you're going to use that they sell?
I'm going to cook backstraps over the barbecue like you would deer elk, and then I'm going to take those hindquarters and front shoulders and roast them just like you would any other venison roast. I mean, it's really not any different. You just want to double check your temperature and make sure you've got up to temperature on bear meat. But yeah, no red, no medium rare. You cook it all the way through. Bear stew is one of my favorites.
And there are some great kits out at highmountainjerky.com. So if you want to try that, do that. I'll be very honest with everybody. I haven't had bear, so except for once in Alaska, we went up there and we got to try all these different things. But I was a little kid, so I don't really remember. But I have friends who are huge fans of bear, and so I guess it can be pretty darn good.
You get over the thought of it, and you put it on a plate next to some walleye and some cow and some kudu and some elk, and you're not going to go, oh, that one's disgusting. Now you're going to, well, this one's different than this, and what is it, right? The same thing with mountain lion. Mountain lion's actually really, really good. So
yeah, there are predators that are good to eat.
You just, walleye are good to eat. They're a predator, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that's, kind of the three, just to sum it up, the three tactics is the baiting, the spot and stalk glassing, and the predator calling. And the predator calling you're going to do some of the same stuff you do when you're spot and stalking, right? You're going to get out to where bears are supposedly supposed to be set up, get the wind in your face, try and maybe get a vantage point where you can see the bear before it sees you, and then just start screaming on that predator call. And sometimes, and we've done it when we're just spring bear hunting spot and stalk, and you can be screaming on that call, and that bear he might pick his head up and look at you and just go back to grazing. He might run in the timber, run away, or he might turn and run right at you. And you never know. Typically, the big bears are going to run at you. Small bears are going to run away from you.
Yeah, the big ones know they're powerful and they can get the job done if they run over there and they want to take something.
And that's, just like duck hunting, just like, decoying any other turkeys, predator calling bears is, it's a whole nother level. You've now communicated a sound, and you've controlled that bear's, movements, outcome, and his decisions. And that's when you've involved that level of deception. That's, you can get into my psyche a little bit, but duck hunting, I've done some jump shooting on canals, and it's fun and it's successful. But there's something about getting ducks to cup their wings, commit, and say, okay, I'm going to come hang out with these decoys in front of you, that you go, aha, I tricked you, right? Mm-hmm. And there's just a level of, because it's not easy. I mean, you can't just say, oh, I'll just throw a couple. 150 years ago, yeah, you could carve some wooden decoys and throw them about anywhere. Now those ducks they're pretty keen on, hey, we get shot when we screw up, right?
They get smart.
And turkeys, I've said this before, you can kill the biggest turkey you'll ever kill in the first 5 minutes of your first turkey hunt, and you can go days on end and get skunked and have gobblers come in and go, I'm not dealing with that. So spring bear hunting is another, it's kind of like Easter egg hunting for adults. There's a little bit of work put into it. There's no guaranteed success by any means. Even baiting, we've had years where nobody gets a bear on the barrel. It's just cool to be able to be in the presence of one of those large carnivores, that large predator, and especially if they don't know you're there, and just get to watch how they interact with their environment. That's, for me, that's the cool part about baiting, is I can be sitting here talking to you and still get to see those trail cam pictures. And I've killed a couple bears now, and there's this progression that I've noticed with other bear hunters, and we've talked about this before on the podcast, is at first it's just, I just want to kill a bear. Any bear, doesn't matter, I just want to get a bear, right? And then it's like, well, now you get a bear, and I want to get another one. I want to get a big one. And then it kind of grows to, okay, I only want to harvest the uber monster or this certain color phase. And even that gets old, and I see bear hunters turn into bear photographers. But once it gets in your blood, it's you just want to go out and see bears. And there's definitely something cool about them. When I harvest that bear, I pack a couple game bags, right? And typically I don't bone the quarters out like you would an elk if you're backpacking, because you're not dealing with you're not dealing with a 700-pound critter, right? And so you're dealing with about a third meat. You can bone it for sure. That's not a problem. But depending on the size of the bear, our Wyoming bears are a little bit smaller than like a coastal black bear or an Ohio bear. And so quarter it up like you would. And I like to rug them when I skin them, save that pelt. And if you're not going to utilize it and save it, somebody will, right? Definitely
use it for something. Give it to somebody to use, but don't leave it.
So, claws come out, hide comes out, skull comes out, all the meat comes out. So you're leaving a pile of pretty much inedible stuff there. And so it takes a little bit of know-how how to separate and process that. And it's slightly different than an ungulate, but it's similar. I would definitely watch a video of how to rug something because you don't want to mess that rug up. And, when you're messing around with and the face is tough and the front arms are a little tough, and definitely around the paws is something you need to figure out. I would highly recommend an outdoor edge knife or a good other sharp knife, and, have way to sharpen it, because, you're going to be grinding your knife along the bone quite a bit trying to get that done. But I have a couple bear rugs, and they're cool. It's, definitely something I would recommend. And if you don't harvest a bear, just getting to go out and see one through the spotting scope, for me, that's a win right there.
Well, yeah, after a long Wyoming or Montana or Idaho winter, people are ready to get out and just be out anyway. So it's worth just getting out of the house and doing something different.
I've had more failed stalks than successful on spring bear, but I've seen bear, and I get to go out and watch them and hang out at camp and get outside. So definitely, I would encourage everybody, if you've never got a chance to go to bear camp and go on a bear hunt, I would definitely put it on your to-do list, because it's, there's a huge difference of driving up into Yellowstone and seeing one on the side of the road where 50 people, to me, it loses its majesty. It's like, right. It's tainted. That's pet boo-boo, right? When I'm 2-3 miles, 4 miles back in somewhere, and I'm glassing and watching a bear where there's no other human around, I feel that that's my memory, right? I don't have to share it with anybody if I don't want to.
Exactly. Well, it's been fun learning a little bit about spring bear. Like I said, that's definitely not in my wheelhouse. So it was fun to visit about that and go through it. For everyone out there, if you want more content, we've got a whole bunch of stuff. We have 50 previous episodes. This is episode 51. Go back and listen to some of those. We've got some really good stuff out there.
Rate, review, subscribe, share, please.
We had a listener this past week reached out and said, hey, I drew the bison tag, and so I wanted to talk to that guy you guys had on the show, and he'd found us, just looking through podcasts and wanted more information. So, we do have a pretty good library now, good information. So yeah, share it with your friends. The rating and subscribing helps a whole bunch. And then of course, just talk to your friends about it. That's a huge thing. If it's helping you, let us know too, because we kind of want to know if it's helpful or not. But
get you a hat, get you a shirt.
Yep.
Show your RADcast pride.
The other sponsor we need to talk about, and I'll preface this with saying our next episode is going to be on post-spawn walleyes. But if you haven't been out to the lake yet and you want to go catch walleyes, PK Lures has you outfitted. The lure that I've done really well on this year is the PK Ridge Rattler. It's a new rattle bait, and I've caught a lot of walleye on it already. My favorite color so far has been the clown. It's been very effective. PK Wobbler this time of year starts to be really effective, trolling real slow with like a crawler harness kind of presentation. So.
Well, depending where you're going on a bear hunt, there may be a body of water close by, and if you get really lucky and are successful, you're going to need something to do to fill out the rest of your week. If midday you're bored, there's nothing wrong with taking a small takedown pack rod and a couple a couple spoons and trying to see if you can scare a fish up for dinner instead of a bear.
In those high mountain lakes too, if you take those really small size PK spoons and PK flutterfish, I've caught a lot of trout on those. So check them out. Go to pklure.com. And like I said, we'll come back on the next episode, do a little bit of walleye for our theme, but go check us out on the socials. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and we'll see you again soon.
See you guys.